It's now my pleasure to introduce Father Sean Wilson, who is our special guest speaker for today. Father Sean grew up in Vandalia, Ohio, graduated from Butler High School in 2008. His family was active for many years in the pro-life movement, which no doubt was a factor in his priestly vocation. After a year at the University of Dayton, he entered formation for the priesthood with the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, and he was ordained by Archbishop Schnurr in 2016. Father Sean now serves as the pastor of Holy Face of Jesus Parish up in God's country, Wapakoneta. So without further ado, Father Sean, thank you for coming.
Thanks so much for having me, Gary. And he mentioned that I'm up in God's country, and to those who are from there, you might know that that's actually a little bit debatable. There are some people that don't think Wapakoneta and Botkins and Rhynie are actually God's country. I know to most of the people in Dayton that is like splitting hairs, but I saw somebody with a Minster shirt on. He might be able to verify that we're on the border, right? So we're on the border. So. Like you said, I grew up in Vandalia, Ohio, graduated from Vandalia Butler, and I've got, all my family has actually moved away from Ohio. I have an older brother. You know what? I'm just going to come around this way. This will be better. This is kind of, unless you need this, do you need this in the shot? Okay. I feel like my eyesight, I'm too tall. My older brother always called me freakishly tall, so. But anyway, so my parents, my older brother, they live down in Georgia now. My younger brother and his wife and kids live in Connecticut. And my older brother is a police detective down in Georgia. And when he was home one time for Thanksgiving, we were going through our family tree. We were kind of talking all the ancestry. My mom's an accountant. She's great with numbers, so she knows she's one of 8. There's 27 grandkids. She knows everybody's birthday off the top of her head. She knows everybody's anniversary. So we're doing the whole family tree, putting them all in, ancestry. And my brother gets a little fascinated, and I do too. And so for Christmas that year, my brother got me one of those Ancestry DNA kits. Maybe you've heard of that. You spit into a little tube, and you send it off to some laboratory, and they told me that I am Caucasian, and that was a shock, you know? But it did come back a few weeks later. Actually, there was a whole lot of anticipation. My older brother, like every 3 days, was calling me or texting me, hey, have you gotten the results back? Have you gotten the results back yet? And I realized eventually that my older brother being a detective meant that they had solved multiple murders in his department, cold cases through this. And so I wonder if he had some suspicions about some of our family members. I don't know. Or maybe it was our younger brother. I don't know. But so it came back, right? It came back, and it turns out I'm from all different parts of Europe. My dad's family is from the south, and so we're hillbillies. So that came back to confirm that. But one of the things that did come back interestingly from the Ancestry DNA is it said this fella named Matt who lived in Massachusetts was my first cousin, and I thought, that's wrong. There's no way that's the case. I know my 27 first cousins. I know all of them. I know where they live. None of us went to the East Coast. And so I sent this guy a message through the Ancestry DNA, and I said, hey, this thing says that we're first cousins. I mean, I live in Dayton, Ohio. You live there. You don't seem like anybody I know that I'm related to. And this fellow very quickly sends a message back, and he says, I'm so happy that you reached out to me. I'm happy that you reached out because I was born in the 1970s in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then I was put up for adoption basically right away. And I had a great family. I had a great life. I'm so grateful that my mother chose life I don't know if this is anybody you're related to, but if you know who I'm related to, could you just tell my parents that I'm grateful for the gift of life that was given to me? And I was just absolutely astounded by that. And so praise God for this, huh? Yeah, great adoption story. And so, of course, I first thank God for the gift of his life, and then I call my older brother and I say, what do we do with this? Call mom. Whenever you have an issue, whenever something comes up, call mom. And my mom, what's going on here? Like, is this our relative? And my mom tells the story that one of her sisters, who is now since deceased, God rest her soul, got pregnant unexpectedly at a time in her life when it was not an opportunity to raise a child. And so she put the child up for adoption. She knew that she had a baby boy, but never knew anything after that. Didn't know what became of him. Didn't know anything of what happened to her son until I found him through Ancestry DNA. And so my mom called her sister who lived out of state and said, hey, my son found your son through this Ancestry DNA, and kind of tells the story. And my aunt had basically gone her whole life praying every day for her son, not knowing what had become of him, whether he had a good life or what had happened. And she was so grateful. And it was, not too long after that she lost her battle with cancer. But I like to think that there was a great resolve, a big kind of just conclusion to this story of always wondering what if. And even for this young man to know that who his mom was and that she chose life. And I think it was one of those moments in my own life where you recognize the value of life. We kind of go through things sometimes and we know that life is important. We're taught from a young age that each and every person is born with an infinite dignity, that God knows, that God loves, that he cares for each and every individual person. But hopefully if we're paying attention, at some moments we realize that, and it hits us right in our heart. It hits us right in the depths of our souls, that each person that we meet is willed, loved, and cared for by God. And it makes what we do here so important, that it's not just some sort of issue that we come to fight or something we want to vote for, whatever. All of those things are a part of it and important. But these are people, right? These are not just numbers, or not just, a yard sign, but these are actual individual people that we're praying for, people that we care for, our own brothers and sisters, our own community members that we dearly love. And so that adoption of my cousin was one of those moments that just kind of hit right in the heart. And there's kind of a great hero of mine, at least I think a great hero in the American Catholic Church, that tells a story about when life really struck him and each individual person's dignity hit home for him. And it was Cardinal John O'Connor, who was the Archbishop of New York City until 2000, when he died at 80 years old. And he was an incredible champion of the pro-life cause, did so many incredible things for life, whether it's public writings or books that he wrote, speeches he gave, just an incredible man for life. But he tells a story. Somebody asked him in an interview, like, when did this happen for you? Like, when did things kind of really change for you? And not that he went through a massive conversion, but he said, it was one time I was traveling in Europe. He was a Navy chaplain, a priest in the Navy for a number of years. And he says, I was traveling through Europe, and as I was going through Europe, we went to this city outside of Munich. And he said it was a beautiful little town, picturesque of what you would think every small, quaint German village, Bavarian village would be like. And so he goes to this German village, and wouldn't you know, just on the outskirts of this village is a camp. And the village that he's in is Dachau, Germany. And so he goes through a tour of the concentration camp in Dachau, Germany. And he says you go through the bunkhouses and you think, well, at a Boy Scout camp, maybe 100 people would be in this bunkhouse. But in Dachau, there's 1,000 people crammed into this bunkhouse. And then he describes the experience of going to the crematorium and being able, there's still ashes there, which people assume that they're ashes of our brothers and sisters who lost their lives in there. And he says, you can see the ashes. And he says, that was the moment in my own life where I realized that life is valuable. When I realized just the sacredness of each and every human life, and how much God loved each and every one of these people that had lost their lives here. So that was for him the moment when he realized just how powerful the sacredness of all lives are. And it changed the course of his own life, right? It changed the things he did, the events he promoted. And one of the ones Cardinal O'Connor really loved was he loved on Pentecost Sunday every year, he would celebrate a confirmation mass at St. Patrick's Cathedral. And the confirmation mass on Pentecost Sunday at St. Patrick's Cathedral was always for disabled children. So ones that had physical deformities, ones that had Down syndrome, one that had any sort of disability, they were always invited to come on Pentecost for their confirmation. And you can see the pictures, you can see the videos of Cardinal O'Connor and what he did, of the time he took with each and every individual person, and how he got to know their stories, he got to know what was important to him. And that was something, the dignity of every human life, whether they're disabled, whether they have high IQs or low IQs, whether they have great emotional intelligence or not, but every single person willed and loved by God. And of course, probably the most important, and who am I to judge what's the most important, but one of the important things that Cardinal O'Connor did for the dignity of life was he established a religious community. In 1991, he put an advertisement in the Catholic newspaper in New York saying, hey, we probably need a group dedicated to life. If anybody seems interested in this, show up or give me a call, write me a letter. And so he founded the Sisters for Life in New York City. And when they asked Cardinal O'Connor, well, what's the point of the Sisters for Life, right? A religious community, religious sisters just dedicated to causes for life. Cardinal O'Connor would say, and you can see videos of this on YouTube, he would say that they do so many important tasks, right? They conducted retreats for women who had had abortions so that they could find healing in Jesus Christ. They staffed crisis pregnancy centers where they took phone calls, where they took donations, much like the one here, crisis pregnancy centers that do so much good work to support the pro-life cause. That they work with men whose children have been lost through abortion, and on, campaigning and for policies and all those certain things. But he said, the most important thing the sisters do, the number one thing they do, is they pray. That they pray that every life may be valued. That they pray that each and every person, no matter who they are, may be respected. And I think as Gary was mentioning kind of this shift that we've had to do in this year, and I think in some ways the gut check that we've had in the pro-life movement this past year, at least in the state of Ohio, when Issue 1, passed and, abortion basically got legalized throughout the state of Ohio. May God have mercy on us. But when that happens, I think it caused many of us to have an examination of conscience, to say, well, what do we do now? All right, what do we do to either double down on politics, and maybe that's the case, but what is the Lord calling us to do spiritually? And I think at the very least, that's where we know we at least have to turn, is that we have to turn back to the Lord, because we realize our efforts in some ways were futile. Our efforts did not come with the results that we thought. And the only possible thing that we can do from here is that we can turn back to God, that we can come back to the Lord and beg, just like our great prophets of old, just like the saints have done, just like Moses did to the Lord, just as David implored God on behalf of his people. It's about all that we know that we have at this point, and it's about as much clarity as we have from the Lord. Is all that we can do is we can pray. We can come back to the Lord and just double down our efforts towards Him, interceding on behalf, but also just growing in love of Him and radiating the goodness of life everywhere we go. St. Francis de Sales, who's the patron saint of the Archdiocese of Cincinnati, used to say that you can attract more people with honey than you can vinegar. You can attract more people with honey than vinegar. And that's basically how we show everybody that life is good, is that the joy that we have, the encounter that we have with other people, and anybody we meet one-on-one, whether they're disabled, whether they're pro-whatever, whether they're pro-life or not, is that their life is valuable too. That their life is good, even if they don't realize it themselves, even if they don't realize that they have dignity. And so maybe the call that we have from here on out, and who knows what the Lord will do in the next year, in the next decade, in the next century, but we know that our prayers will never be in vain. That any rosaries that we pray, that any time we gather here and pray the Psalms, just as we did pray Psalm 62 a few moments ago, that our prayers will never go unanswered. Even if we never see the full fruit of them, we know that we're like that sower that Christ tells in the gospel, where he just goes out and scatters seed everywhere. And in some ways he seems wasteful. Right? That sower goes out and he's scattering seed on the rocky ground. He's scattering seed amongst the thorns. He's scattering seed on the path. I grew up in the suburbs. I don't know jack crap about farming. Right? And my parishioners will tell you that. They'll tell you that I don't know anything about farming. But what I do know is that if I planted something in this here parking lot, it would not grow. Unless maybe if I got it reeled down in one of the cracks. But the sower scatters seed there. The sower scatters seed even where logically it's not going to grow. And maybe that's what our efforts, our spiritual efforts are. When we seem hopeless, when we seem like we don't know what we're doing, or this just seems like it's a waste of our energy, we just keep scattering our prayers. We keep imploring the Lord, even when we don't see the fruits, even when it seems like the ground is barren. We just keep scattering the seed that the Lord has entrusted to us. And that's what the good Lord's asking us to do. Because in all honesty, we never know when there'll be somebody who was given a life 45 years ago, 50 years ago, that we didn't know, that we'll come across, and because somebody prayed or somebody chose life, we'll realize that this person exists, that their children exist, that their grandchildren exist because one person chose life. And that makes it all worth it. That makes it all worth it if one person chooses life, because that affects generations, that affects the centuries. And so we trust that our prayers will never go in vain. That no matter how barren it seems like the parking lot of the soil is, the Lord can do so much with so little. If he can feed 5,000 with 5 loaves and 2 fish, he can also do so much with our prayers. And so maybe during this 40 days for life, when so many people will gather here in prayer, we'll redouble our efforts. And even if we don't see the immediate fruits of our labor, we'll trust that the Lord's at work in hearts, in lives, in souls, and we'll trust that the good Lord will answer our prayers, even if we don't see the full fruit. It's been a blessing to be here with you. May God always look kindly upon those who participate in 40 days for life, and may he answer all of our prayers in some way, shape, or form. God bless.